power vaccination. The power sector in India hit hard by COVID-19. We all are aware of that, and is slowly getting back on track. Peak power demand is back to normal. The government has also announced a liquidity scheme for the power sector with an outlay of rupees 1,20,000 crore under the AtmaNirbhar Bharat Scheme to boost confidence in this sector. However, as we move into the post-COVID-19 era, the sector needs a much-needed vaccination of immunity to be able to withstand all challenges and attain a strong, resilient recovery. Today, on this note, you are going to witness an engaging interactive session. Apart from the discussion on the opportunities and challenges for the electrical and power sector, experts will talk about how the India's electrical and power sector is turning the tide in its favor. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor and privilege for me to introduce you to today's distinguished speakers, Mr. Anil Sabu, President IMA, Mr. Vimal Mahendru, President Lagro India, Mr. Gautam Seth, Joint Managing Director, HPL Electric and Power Limited. So delegates, get ready to witness a power-packed session on power vaccination. To take the session forward, I would like to invite Mr. Anil Sabu. Sabuji is the newly elected president of Indian Electrical and Electronics Manufacturer Association, that is IMA, the apex association of the Indian electrical equipment manufacturing industry. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Right. He is the chairman and managing director of Electrolytes Power Private Limited, one of the leading manufacturers and exporters of various switch gears from India. Mr. Sabu was also the chairman of Electrama 2020, the flagship showcase of the Indian electrical and industry ecosystem, and the largest congregation of power sector ecosystem in the geography. Today, he is going to discuss about the recent performance of power sector in India, the future of Indian power sector in 2021, and how IMA plans to support boost in exports and local manufacturing in order to make electrical equipment industry self-reliant and globally competitive. So let's welcome Mr. Anil Sabu.
I would like to thank you for giving this opportunity to represent the electrical industry perspective, outlook, and expectations of industry to boost the sector. Friends, we are at interesting juncture. The world is looking towards India to deliver and take the leadership role, especially in this uncertain time. The uncertain time is unexpected, unprecedented, uncertain, and universal. All five U's are there. Indian industry has adequate capacity, and most of them have actually been expanding their manufacturing base and setup based on the domestic economic growth and rise of Indian exports. The opportunity for Indian products in the present scenario is to become self-reliant, relevant, as well as sustainable for the next decade. Average early global market of electrical products is approximately 500 billion US dollar as per International Energy Agency World Energy Outlook report. And as per the report, the cumulative demand for a period of 14 years from 2016 to 2030 shall be doubled than in 2008 to 2015 in distribution and transmission, and around 2.5 times in generation. Indian global export in the electrical equipment sector rose from 5.69 billion US dollar in 2016 to 8.62 billion US dollar in 2019-20. That is almost 29%. However, 8.62 billion is just marginally less than 2% of the global market. Our total world dream is aligned to go 30 billion, which we can achieve by tripling the export to 25 billion, plus additionally 5 billion can be achieved by AtmaNirbhar Bharat by import substitution. Import substitution is just like deemed export, which can be half of the present export now. The industry is already in stress due to COVID-19. However, I see this as an opportunity for smart grid solutions to become an integral part of our electricity ecosystem, as it helps utilities to manage both the grid and consumers remotely without much of the manual intervention at lower cost. Discoms need to adopt digitalization and technology along with the innovations to enhance efficiency and resilience. The Ministry of Power, Government of India recently proposed Electricity Amendment Bill 2020, which could help the sector to be self-reliant and efficient, as well as access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy systems, which government is really focusing on now. Measures like privatization of discoms are need of the hour. We need to think of innovative business models to keep up the pace of modernization through smart grid technologies. Government as well as private sector should come forward to work together to implement the innovation business model. Indian industry has always been dynamic and a lot of zeal and enthusiasm exist among existing and new entrepreneurs, along with the MSME units also. With all the constraints, the industry does deliver whenever the country needs it. And the government has rightly emphasized on AtmaNirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. Indian power industries need to invest more in R&D, technology, and innovation to upgrade themselves and make themselves capable of capturing the world market, as we have less than 2% and we can go up to 5 to 6% of the huge 500 billion US dollar market. Since its establishment in 1948, IMA has played a vital role in strengthening the Indian electrical industry ecosystem. IMA has always come forward with many initiatives during its glorious journey of 73 years to help MSME and industry to grow. Electroma is our flagship industry connect, which has gained tremendous reputation in the bringing the entire industry at single platform and connect to the world. While Electroma has been growing over the years, but to cater the new normal now and increased virtual world, we launched DigiLec Bharat and eConnect for more frequent and virtual connect to the industry members to benefit and enable them to connect with the global market. And it's a really tremendous opportunity to connect with the global market. Recently, IMA conducted a virtual exhibition come conference to showcase IMA members' capabilities, which attracted more than 6,000 unique visitors, 33,000 footballs, and 2,500 conference attendees from world over. So we are going to enhance these opportunities for our members, our industry. Friends, once we become Atmanirbhar, then we can easily serve domestically as well as internationally. We have at present working around 50% our capacity, and there is a 50% additional manufacturing capacity as well as human capability by which we can reach out our target and dream.
Now, in this session of EPR Magazine webinar on power vaccination, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Gautam Seth. Mr. Gautam has more than 2 decades of experience in the field of electrical industry and has carried forward HPL Electric and Power Limited with pure dedication and commitment. He has been involved foremost in the group's sales and marketing activities and has spearheaded the group's various forays into new products and greenfield projects. As Mr. Sabu said earlier, the Indian electrical equipment industry is all set for a bright future, and maybe within a couple of hours, it's going to become Atmanirbhar. With various initiatives taken by government, the domestic demand will grow exponentially. At the same time, the domestic manufacturers are eyeing for global markets too. On this note, Gautam is going to talk about whether the domestic manufacturers should meet local demand or go global. So let's welcome Mr. Gautam Seth.
At the outset, I would like to say that the meet local or go global are not two options, but in fact, for any Indian electrical manufacturer, they are something of what we will need to adopt both of them together if we are really looking to strive and grow. If you look at the Indian economy and more specifically the electrical and electronic industry, what we all represent, there are two factors, I believe, which are really driving the manufacturing or which are going to be the major boosters for the manufacturing in India. The first one is that India is looking for uh, an alternative where like an import substitution, like we are looking to replace the imports what the industry is doing from China and other countries. And the government's initiative of AtmaNirbhar Bharat, which is to make India self-reliant, is definitely a very good initiative. And as Anilji was saying, it is something which is going to be a powering force, which is definitely a very big opportunity. In fact, if you see in the last month's annual convention of EMA, where the minister, from a government perspective, was very strong in his words. He in fact said that instead of putting money or giving money to other countries, one needs to invest it in India in manufacturing, and that will also help us to create jobs in the country. But also the kind of incentives they put in a task force for identifying various manufacturing hubs, certain kind of fiscal or other incentives are also coming by. So when the government's intent is very strong on that, definitely it's a big opportunity for manufacturers like us. The second point where I see a huge uh, opportunity for the India as a manufacturing base is that the world itself is looking for India as an alternative source, alternative to, of course, countries like China, or even they are looking to replace those their sources, and that provides a very big opportunity for us. And by us, I mean is for the entire Indian electrical industry as such. So by these two actions, if you see, a lot of focus is coming back into the manufacturing. Traditionally, in the last couple of years, we have seen the services from India coming up, like the IT services, which have been really strong, and they have been in the as front runners in the Indian economy. But going forward with these two factors and many more coming in, the manufacturing is definitely going to shape up. Now, when we look at the manufacturing, the local consolidation is essential as a stepping stone to go for manufacturing for the global markets. And before one goes to the global markets, one definitely needs to consolidate within the country to go forward. The government's pitch, when government talks about vocal for local, it's a great initiative where one is it's an extension of Make in India. But to make that vocal for local successful, one is also looking at putting in a suitable policy framework. The infrastructure support needs to be there, apart from the taxation, the incentive, and other important things what one needs to do. So looking at whether one needs to meet for the local requirement or go global, or the focus on manufacturing, the government of course has a huge task cut out for themselves, where they need to put in a lot of things. I would believe there are 5 to 6 important things which really the government needs to put in if one has to take India to make it as a global hub. The initiative of the manufacturing, of course, rests on private manufacturers or entrepreneurs like us, including the MSME, which form a very strong tier 2 ancillary manufacturing, more for the components and support services. So the government, of course, needs to invest into the infrastructure, because the infrastructure, we have been hearing a lot about it, but still there are, I would believe, a lot of gaps in it, whether we look at the road, rail, ports, any kind of direct or indirect infrastructure which needs to be coming in, including the manufacturing hubs on the industrial clusters which need to be done. Secondly, the government needs to ensure a 24/7 power supply. In fact, all the panelists today are from the power sector, and in the last 15 years, we have seen a lot of reforms, a lot of upgradation of the infrastructure for the electricals transmission and distribution system. But still, a lot has happened, but we are still miles to go, and a lot more needs to happen if we are truly looking at the manufacturing to be further enhanced. Then, of course, there are the labor laws which need to be much more flexible, much more industry friendly. The banking and the financial infrastructure is again a very important thing which the government needs to look at, because if there are customers or entrepreneurs who are looking to invest, to do a lot of manufacturing, eventually one requires the financial support. The government, of course, has been giving certain kind of priority status or lending to the MSMEs, but still a sectoral priority, looking at the power sector or others, could also be fairly important in this. Then there are, of course, taxations, incentives, what are there. Now, as we see, the electrical industry is moving towards the electronic side, and there is a lot of digitization happening, a lot of electronics coming in. If you see, we represent, like as HPL Electric, I represent the electronic industry as well, where we are one of the largest meter manufacturers. So in today's time, the electronic components, the chips and everything, we are all dependent upon imports from other countries. And the government has in the past, or I would say is currently also pursuing a plan how the electronic infrastructure can be enhanced. And basically it is the components and other things. So for us, if we are looking at a very strong manufacturing base, definitely the electronic industry needs to be put in, the backbone needs to be put in, because that is going to help the entire electronics, even going beyond to consumer durables or even to the mobiles and other things. So these six items, I feel, which the government really needs to focus, where to make India much more stronger in terms of manufacturing. Now, coming back to what the Indian entrepreneurs or the companies need to do, is that, of course, it's the initiative has to come from us. The government can only provide a framework, but nothing beyond that. And for us to go ahead, I think the focus on R&D, the focus on technology upgradation needs to be there. A strong focus on standards, complying with the global standards, going for the certifications. There are today certifications in our sector which are much more widely acceptable. And of course, then there are some more country specific certifications which are there. So as an entrepreneur, it's the mindset where to become a global manufacturer, one will have to look at these type of investments, continuously focus on these type of activities, even putting the resources on R&D, which is of course a very continuous process. So that needs to be done by the Indian industry. There's another important point, what I feel is, and that is talking about the human capital. Skilling and training is one thing which I would say it is not of a priority with many of us many times. But today, in today's time, when the industries are changing, the technologies are changing, the markets are changing, so we really need to look at a lot of ways in which we are able to reskill our workers, reskill our staff, and that eventually pays us back in terms of either a better factory productivity or a better and more consistent quality coming on the products. So definitely these type of factors are playing an important role. So for us, when I look at it from my little experience, one has to focus on the consistently on the quality, the technology upgradation, R&D, and other things. Initially, like we did in HPL, even 20, 25 years back, we, thanks to certain of our joint venture partners which came in very early and certain global customers, even at that time when we were very small, we focused on backward integration. So every type of thing, whether at a component level. So when we got into meters, right from a design, development, electronic manufacturing, the components, plastic, sheet metal, everything we did in-house. And that helped us to stay abreast with the technology. As the technology changed, we were able to innovate, put in much more better practices into our manufacturing and also in the product design. And eventually, the easiest thing was, of course, to focus on the Indian market, because that was much more easier, much more cheaper to access with. But over the past maybe now 5 to 7 years, when our focus has shifted to the export markets, we are seeing a very easy acceptance of our product, primarily because the mindset and the products which were put in over the last 2 decades were of the certain quality and standards which were eventually acceptable globally. So that really helped us as we grew. And similarly, as we are now going for more certifications and other things, it becomes much more easier. So just to sum up, today, when one looks at whether it's a meet local or go global, I think it is both of it. One has to start from somewhere. But in today's time, when we look at with the pandemic coming in, and we are in an age of high disruption, where a lot of technologies are changing, the way of doing business. In fact, after the lockdown, thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, the way we are doing business, the way we are communicating with our customers, the way we approach the market, the digital transformation, everything has a different impact on the business. And in today's growing time, when we see things are changing, but we are sitting on huge opportunity, the world is looking to us. We ourselves have certain advantages of manufacturing which we can offer to the world. And with government's strong intent, I think when we mix all of them up, definitely it's a very strong mix which we can exploit. And if things go like this, I would personally believe in the next 5 years, 10 years, it is going to be a golden period for the Indian manufacturing, whether for India, for Indian or global companies in India, or even for the global market. And truly, I think with the way the industry has said, we can at least ensure the electrical and electronic industry to be Atmanirbhar, truly self-reliant.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for us to have Mr. Vimal Mandru with us. Mr. Mandru is the president of Lagro India, a subsidiary of the French multinational Lagro. Besides this, he is presently the International Electrotechnical Commission, that is IEC Standardization Management Board member from India, and chair of the IEC Systems Committee on Low Voltage Direct Current and Low Voltage Direct Current for Electricity Access, that is SYCLVTC. And he is also the IEC ambassador, especially focusing on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, that is SDGs, and guiding IEC's deployment of SDG-centric standardization and conformity assessment programs. Today, he is going to enlighten us on 3S, that is Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, standardization, and self-reliance. So delegates, let's welcome Mr. Vimal Mandru.
I'm absolutely convinced that this pandemic is a unique, unusual event in the history of our world. There has been a pandemic earlier also, but this one is quite an impactful one. When did we realize that we would be taking to Zoom as much as we are now using it? But I'm absolutely convinced at the same time that through this churning, through this kind of unusual circumstances, we will come out better as a society. So I'm really hoping for that. And this, in a way, builds on what Sabuji mentioned when he said, together we can, together we will, not only as an industry, but as a society also. And also what Mr. Seth mentioned, the initiative lies within us. Again, to get out of this pandemic, the initiative lies within us. We have to continue to follow all the social distancing and other COVID-19 related protocols. Without that, forget it, whether we will not be able to do anything. So I'm glad that we are in this together, and the initiative lies with us to come out of this. Wonderful. Uh, in fact, my very first slide should give you an impression what I'm going to talk about. Decade of action. बात बहुत हो गई, अब काम करने का time है. The message that Sabuji has shared, the message that Mr. Seth has shared is powerful, it's inspiring, but we all know what we need to do. The industry knows what we need to do. Now we just need to make sure that we pull our socks up and start working in that direction. I'm not sure how many of our listeners today are familiar with IC or some of the nuts and bolts of IC. So I'm taking the liberty of introducing very quickly what IC is. It is the oldest standardization body in the world, started in 1906. So it's more than 114 years young, I would say. 173 countries, which means literally 99% of the world population is directly impacted by IEC standards and conformity assessment schemes. 99%. There are roughly 20,000 global experts who participate in the standards development process. This is done through about 206 committees. And what do these committees do? Let me quickly share. We talk about AtmaNirbhar Bharat. Let me talk a little about the global trade. Global trade and the WTO regulations are all taking technical input from only 3 organizations worldwide: IEC, ISO, and ITU. IEC provides most of the technical input for electrical, electronics, and anything which uses electricity. ISO generally focusing on the service standards, and ITU on the telecom side of standardization. Now, this is actually the reason why IEC standards are critical for the world. If as a nation, we were not to influence IEC standards or participate in the standards development process, what does it mean? It definitely means one thing, that somebody else will make a standard and we will need to follow it, which means they are influencing global trade. They are influencing WTO. We as an industry would not be influencing WTO. Okay. So all the more reason, if we want to do AtmaNirbhar Bharat, and if we want to do Make in India and we want to export from our country to other countries, we have to essentially participate in all the trade which will take place on WTO platform. It will essentially be governed through IEC standards. And non-IEC standard products cannot be part of this WTO platform, at least. And there are more countries participating in WTO-based trade than ever before. So all the more reason for us as a nation, it's important to be active and proactive in influencing IEC standards, because the moment we influence that, we are directly influencing WTO and our trade opportunity in the global trade. The scope of IEC standards itself, here are a few terms I shaded in blue just to stand out, electrical and electronic devices, infrastructure, smart standards for, smart urbanization, transportation, energy access, energy efficiency, etc. Almost this whole array of standards comes from IEC committees that I've mentioned. To me, this is a very impactful slide. If you think about global trade, roughly 41% of all global trade today is directly impacted by IEC standards. Roughly 20% is in terms of electrical and electronic goods. Another 13% is about primary energy, that is generation side and transmission. And vehicles, as we are rapidly electrifying our vehicles and the transportation sector, it's about 8% of that. The total is 41%. So imagine that 41% of all global trade is directly impacted by IEC standards. Can we as a nation afford not to participate in this? Of course not. And if we have to raise that, I think Sabuji shared, we are less than 2% of global trade. If we have to take our fair normal share of this trade of 41%, we have no choice but to participate in international standardization. Let me move further. Another big thing that's happening is the Sustainable Development Goals. If you will recall, in 2015, our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, was in Paris to sign the Paris Accord. In the Paris Accord, what happened really? It was 196 global heads of state from countries who met and signed a pledge to their citizens saying that these 17 promises, the 17 things that you see, the 17 SDGs on this screen right now, these 17 promises were made by the heads of state to the citizens of their countries. And they said that we will provide you all of these 17 latest by 2030. There was a deadline also. 2030, they were to deliver all these. 5 years have passed, and now we are into the last 10 years. That's why I call it the decade of action. Now let's look at these. No poverty, zero hunger. They're not easy to do. In IEC, we did a survey in 2017 to validate which of these are directly impacted by IEC standards and how can the electrotechnical community worldwide begin to support this initiative of the political leadership of the world. And much to our surprise, we realized that all the 17 SDGs today can be fulfilled only if there is electricity in abundance in an efficient manner. Not just SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy. Of course, it's an important one. But can you today remove hunger and remove poverty by not providing electricity? It wouldn't happen because anyway, opportunities are linked with availability of electricity or not. And this is the reason why electrotechnical sector itself, power generation, transmission, distribution, and consumption is becoming critical to fulfilling all the promises, let's say, the global heads of state have made to the citizens worldwide. And this is the reason we are already seeing a lot of influence coming in from the regulators and the regulatory framework on industry. And this is going to increase. If you've been following the press in the last 2 months, it is all about the European Green Deal, which is where Europe is almost entirely moving toward a totally sustainable model, not just the 17 SDGs. And that sustainability promise in Europe is that by 2050, they'll go entirely, totally sustainable in everything that they do. Let me go further. And just as an example, I'm explaining a little more in depth of SDG 7, which is closer to the power and electrical sector. SDG 7 is about ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy for all. For each of these SDGs, the 17 that I've shown, in every country there are several targets and indicators. In total, about 169 targets to be achieved, and then there are indicators. That means how you will measure the achievement. For this specific SDG 7, for affordable and clean energy, there are 5 targets and 7 indicators. And just to give you an example, here's a list of those. It's a little finer print, maybe you can read it or not. But let's take a look at this. These have been developed under the UN banner, but developed by heads of state and political leadership, regulators coming together. It's not developed by the industry. But see the language that is being used here: reliable, renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy infrastructure, energy services, upgrading technology, energy intensity, primary energy, clean energy. These are all terms which the electrical industry is used to. So imagine the political leadership of 196 countries is already making these promises to the people. Can we afford not to follow with the right standards which deliver all of this? And can the industry afford not to follow the standardization process? If we were not to follow this, we can forget about AtmaNirbhar Bharat or even Make in India. This is my personal view. I think if we really want to take a rightful place in this global community, we really need to engage with this topic of SDGs, and then through SDGs, making sure that we are influencing standards in the proper manner. May I also say that in IC, we have already started this deep engagement process with global industry and industry stakeholders, but also with government officers, with UN organizations, funding agencies, global foundations, to make sure that everybody is on the same platform. There is a, as engineers, we love to design good products and bring them to the market. Is that enough? If the regulations are going in a certain direction and we take technology in a different direction, forget it. We cannot compete with that. So we need to make sure that the way the regulations are going and the way the technology is going, they're totally aligned. And so this level of deep engagement that IEC is embarking on, this is going to be helpful in making sure that the industry understands what the public needs, what the regulators require, what the heads of state are expecting from us. And having understood, then we go and implement. I'm also including a link in this to a very good paper which was published earlier this year, 2 months back. It's a very powerful document which lists the roadmap that IEC has developed on implementation of SDGs through IEC standards. And last but not the least, I want to conclude by sharing this. Standardization, AtmaNirbhar Bharat, Make in India, we know what is required, but it is not a spectator thing that I can sit aside and say, if you do your job, then I will do my job. We have to get engaged. We have to start demanding a lot more. We have to start participating, moving and getting rid of the inertia that sometimes we get bogged down with. It's great to have expectations from others, but I want to connect to what Sabuji said. Together we can, but within the together also, what I can do and how I will mold myself so that tomorrow is slightly better than today, and day after is better than tomorrow, and the next is even better. If that small incremental improvement I can bring in as a culture in myself, in my company, in my industry, there is nothing stopping India.
Though the India's electrical and power sector on the cusp of turnaround, as everyone was talking, even Mr. Mendru, Mr. Anil Sabu, as well as Mr. Gautam, everyone agrees that it's on the cusp of a turnaround in revenue. There are challenges too. Sabuji, could you talk on the burning issues you see as the need of the hour for your industry, especially because you represent IMA as a whole, that need urgent attentions? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Roy. I really appreciate what Vimalji and Gautam has conveyed, and a very strong message by Vimalji for standardization. So that was one of the aspects really we need very badly. And in IMA, we have this time we have already promoting a standardization cell, which Mr. Vimal Mendru will be driving that. That is the need of the hour. Regarding direct challenges to the industry, the one is fund facilitation, because availability of finance and at a competitive rate of finance is a challenging for electrical industry. And the problem gets further aggravated by unhealthy discoms, as suppliers do not get payment on time, and lot of funds are blocked in bank guarantees. So industry requires easy availability of finance at globally competitive rates to really cater to the world market. So somehow the government is also looking towards to address these issues, but it will take some time. The second is public procurement processes. The public procurement process, there is preference to make in India, order needs to be implemented strictly on the state-owned power utilities as well as in private sector also. Regarding L1 price procurement, this L1 price system is really overlooking value addition. Quality and life cycle cost has led to poor or delayed execution of the project with cost, time run, overrun, and also to arbitrations. So this really we have to redefine and rationalize this public procurement processes with scientific parameters and needs to be stabilized. The third is adoption of new technology and trends. Like we have to really, as Gautam ji also conveyed, that now electronics is also part of the electrical, because all electrical equipments also need to be communicable, and that will really increase the quality of power, that will save the cost also and time run also. So we need to adopt digitalization, IoT and artificial intelligence in our electrical system. The fourth one, I will insist for the type test acceptability. Actually, Indian labs in various countries, Indian labs are not recognized, and time again and again we are approaching and we are approached the government also to get them recognized, because otherwise electrical equipment has a enormous amount of type testing charges are there, and if we really want to global, then we need to have the acceptability of these test labs, or we can create test lab in India with the support of the government, so that those with the standardization also, so that they can be acceptable to everyone, and our industry can go to the world market. At the same time, we can enhance the quality of products in India also.
I think Sabuji has addressed the entire point. Of course, standardization is a much bigger topic than just government addressing it. To me, it is something that we have to participate. The experts who know the technology, the nuts and bolts of transformers, the transmission lines, and circuit breakers, and energy meters, that lies in the entrepreneurial spirit of the people. We have to make sure that those people are on the table to really take forward that and influence standards accordingly. So I would love to see the government funding standardization initiatives which support the country. That would be very helpful. But other than that, I think Sabuji has covered.
One is on the, I did talk about R&D, that companies must do R&D. And if you look at the metering industry, the R&D is very important in that. Like, we are still a medium-sized company, but we are having almost now 200 people in R&D who are fully focused on not only the metering technologies, but also on communication, a lot of AI related type of R&D which is happening. But what we see is that the incentive from the government is still very less or missing. And if India as an industry or electrical electronics are looking at making India a truly large manufacturing base, the first point which the government will need to invest is on R&D. Of course, it takes time. Not every R&D is successful, but that is something where the government will really have to put in their money, because that is going to help the eventual manufacturing in a bigger way. And even if we look at re-engineering, which is still more, of a shortcut, or maybe even jugaad, if you have to say it in a little more crude manner, that also involves a certain amount of R&D, of having the requisite manpower and other things. So that thing needs to be incentivized by the government. if we are really looking at it, and I mean by real incentives. It's not just, there are some smaller bits and pieces, but nothing to that extent. The second thing is, as if you look at the discoms, although governments over the past many years, many governments, even last we had the Uday scheme, still the financial health of discoms is not really great. And directly or indirectly, our products eventually ends up through some discom. Eventually it's the grid is with them, the distribution is with them, and then there are the last mile connectivities where all of us, the entire industry, comes in. So for the industry to grow, and even for a strong manufacturing to grow, the discoms need to be in great health. And this is something where the government, of course in the past they have done it. It's not that they have not done anything, but still the results are missing. And this is where they will need to put in some strong decisions. They will have to put in some money, put in some, some do's and don'ts on how the thing needs to happen. But a strong financial health of discoms is very essential for the industry to really go forward. The third is what I mentioned earlier also, is that the electronic backend needs to be very strong as we go forward, because eventually everything gets covered in that. If our import bill is likely of electronics is likely to be more than oil, so you can understand the gravity of what the amount of forex we are talking about, and the dependence when we are talking on one side on Atmanirbhar, and other side we are so much dependent on electronics for outside. So that again makes us very vulnerable. So these are three things. Apart from this, of course, there are the skilling, the human capital, financial, testing, certifications, and these incentives which are typically which any industry would require. But my take would be on these 3 points.
One is, I would be very happy if Mr. Mahendra could share his presentation, because it was very, very fascinating to understand on the IEC growth. I am also involved with another automation body, so all of us are pushing for standardization in the country, and IEC, ISO, all of IEEE, and all are these standard organizations. And if these are accepted, I believe, by the industries, then the QA problem is also solved. The second is, as an importer, we are finding problems that when we are importing certain items, the customs says that you require a BIS certificate. How do I get a BIS certificate for an item coming from Europe? The BIS body should accept the IEEE or IEC certificate given by my company in Europe.
Well,
Great question.
well,
But I'm not an expert on BIS or the customs processes. So I think I will have to sidestep this question because it's very specific. And I think, but I know I deal very much, quite a bit with BIS, which is also the Indian National Committee host of the IEC. I know that there is an international cell which manages all international transactions and input. I will definitely encourage you to reach out to them for clarification. Typically, what happens is that a BIS certificate is required if something has an Indian standard, but not just a standard. There is a regulation in place by the government which is gazetted. If it is a gazetted notification regarding a product or something that you want to import, then a BIS certificate is required. I understand that there are these kind of gazetted notifications coming from the government for a whole array of products, including in the electrical industry, what is known as the CRO, complete registration order, which has come out. And so it may be related to that, but I will definitely encourage you to get in touch with BIS, which can clearly address this issue. Thank you.
Whenever there is a problem, there are 100 solutions are there. It is only we who have to look for that. Regarding manufacturing challenges, one is we should adopt cluster approach. Like some 30 cable manufacturer, they can even choose one place where they can have their infrastructure, and this cluster approach will make them competitive. Instead of competing with each other, those 30 companies can collaborate with each other. As recently we had interaction with the Commerce Minister Mr. Piyush Goyal ji also, and our Power Minister Mr. R.K. Singh ji also, regarding capital goods. When we asked them for the facilities for testing, they straightway suggested that it is better to have a cluster manufacturing. So if that is the hub, we can government also can facilitate to provide the testing facility and other infrastructure. We all need to focus on design in India, innovate in India, and in addition to manufacture in India. Because the quality or anything, this first step is, if you have rightly designed the product, then the quality will be just outcome of that. Quality is not a separate issue if you are designed well. So even you will be surprised to know that engineering research and development is the next big thing now. In the world, almost 30% research is done in India. And so big companies of the world are investing in India because here they have the human capital to do that at quite cost competitive prices and costs. So we should also focus on R&D, and the government, we are just Indian industry is just investing 0.6% of their turnover, where the world standard is more than 2 to 3%. So in R&D, certainly, as Mr. Gautam Seth also insisted, that this is the way to one of the solution is there. Then the digitalization. Now, new concepts like e-vehicle, renewable, IoT, energy storage, we have to become the world leader in these new trends, which is part of the energy ecosystem only. So we need to adopt those things, and at the same time, regarding to get the right technology. Even EMA, we are creating a technology and R&D cell this time. Committee is also there. So we will make a platform where MSME units or any industry who want to have some technology, they can register there, and from the world over, wherever the technology is available, they can also register there to match their expectations, and that way we can really grow together.
One of the most vibrant things that we have in our country is actually the entrepreneurial spirit. I've had the privilege of traveling to many countries in the world, and I can confirm this, that Indian entrepreneurs have the ability to think smart, act frugal, and bring about jugaad which delivers good value. Jugaad not in terms of non-standard risky things, but good innovative products. Now, my own father started his business to make a simple industrial switch in 1958. In spite of all the odds, there was no infrastructure in the country, not a single manufacturer of industrial switches at that time when he started. Similar is the story, I'm sure Mr. Seth can share from his family, and Sabuji can share his experience. And like us, there are millions of young entrepreneurs who can do a lot of things. What do we really need? Of course, there are a lot of things related to the overall opportunity, but the real thing what we crave for is make a consistent policy and leave me alone to run the business and to really show what I can do. The challenge of frequent changes in policy frameworks or state to state change. This AtmaNirbhar should be a national slogan adopted, absorbed, and endorsed by every state in the country. It should not happen that, maybe for some narrower considerations or short term considerations, some states take it up, some states may not take it up, or the policy this year is this, but next year it may change or something. That consistent input is important. My slogan, which comes more from an entrepreneurial spirit, is give me a policy framework, give me the infrastructure, and then get out of the way. then I will go and conquer the world.
The education and entrepreneurship, everything starts even at the age of 15 or 12. People have some dreams. And when they come to the college or technical institute, then they need some hand holding during their studies itself. That's why now EMA is also focusing to collaborate with institutions, and even we are calling some interns also. And now here the institution as well as industry both have to work together as partners. The um, even industry uh, doesn't have so much time to totally focus on R&D. What they can do is they can take their problems to the institutes, and there the professors, under the guidance of certain professors, the students can find out the solutions. So that way they will get trained, and when they come out of the college, even they will be there will be direct jobs for them. So EMA is now collaborating with many institutes, and in time to come we will further enhance that engagement. At the same time, you see, you must have seen in Ilakramas also, we have already there is a separate booths for entrepreneurs to show, some startup companies to show their technology, so that what the people from world over comes there, and they adopt them, they can, and they get also encouraged. We have some award system also for them. So that way EMA is focusing to nurture the entrepreneurship.
When one looks at, in fact, when one is looking to go global, there are certain minimum parameters which one needs to have, a certain amount of quality, certain amount of technology, because the accepted norms, and especially we are in electrical products, electronic products, which require a huge, the safety levels should be very high, because ultimately it can endanger the human life. So a minimum quality, technology, or certain basic parameters need to be there. Now, for any startup company, or like Vimalji was saying, typically our fathers started off as very entrepreneurial, in an entrepreneurial way, and it started off and then grew in a much larger way. So at that time, obviously, to focus on the outside, and with every country having different standards, was difficult. So what I meant by local consolidation is anybody looking to go like that, it's a logical way what comes out, that when one focuses on uh, one's quality, product, technology, internal processes, so eventually one matures into a level where one can start exploiting the international market. And we are a perfect example of that, where we started off, we in every probably district, we have been there in the country, having offices everywhere. And when we started looking to the international markets, it became much more smoother. And today, with our almost 5,000 people working in HPL with 7 factories, we are now exporting to 42 countries, and it's happened pretty smoothly. uh, of course, on the work of the export, but also on the background work which has been done over the last 2 decades, which made the products and everything very easily accessible. Otherwise, if one has to, so it's a way of starting somewhere, eventually to reach the end. So that's what I meant by on the local consolidation.
Working towards sustainability should not negatively impact profitability, but on the other hand, I am convinced that done properly, it will add to profitability.
Right.
The biggest profit is that you will feel good about it, that you are leaving behind a better world for your children and coming generations. There is no monetary equivalent for that comfort and that knowledge that we are leaving behind a better world by working on sustainability and sustainable development goals. Having said, let's further explore. There is enough research done worldwide that working towards sustainable solutions does not really add cost. On the other hand, today also, if you go to the market, there are normal vegetables you and I can buy, and there are organic vegetables you and I can buy. Organic vegetables, we pay a premium for those. It's not that they cost more to manufacture, to produce. The same goes for sustainable solutions. So I'm convinced that working towards sustainability will not add so much to the cost, but will add much more to the profitability of the business, simply because one, of the premiums that you can command, and second, because anyway you're creating a better world. And once we raise the bar for everyone to produce sustainable products, then the non-sustainable product should be out of the window. I mean, imagine a paradigm shift. The moment we start talking about sustainability and sustainability of products, that means everything which is not sustainable is unsustainable. Now, would you consider installing non-sustainable or unsustainable solutions? I think, who wants to do that? And this is where I think the paradigm shift is taking place. Are all IEC standards automatically accepted by BIS in India? To this, the answer is no. And I also would not like BIS to personally to that they automatically accept international standards without even reviewing what really is required for the country and what we need. So I definitely feel that one, we should participate in the standards development so that whatever IEC is standard is coming out for the global community, 99% of the world population, that is actually carrying our influence, because it's like in every country we are installing our own flag, so that when Mr. Seth talks about exporting to 42 and next 142 countries, the Indian product is already part of the standard which is applicable in that country. This is the first point. The second point is that when we adopt standards, we must also evaluate standards whether those standards are addressing our specific and unique needs. India, because of its kind of climate conditions, because of the extremes of weather and climate, from the deserts to the very high mountain terrain to the tropical forests down south to the temperate climates in the north, we have a very wide array of climates across our country. We also have a very dusty environment, which may not be everywhere. We have a very dense population. So this, when you compare with the standards which are produced, the interesting thing about standards is they are produced by experts from those countries who come around the table and they sit and they discuss. If India is not sitting on the table over there, then Indian input on dusty conditions, temperature conditions, or terrain are not with them. So, in all earnestness, they would make a standard which will not look at these conditions, because nobody's going to look at these conditions on their own unless we go and tell them. So participating in the right standard is important. And that's why when any IEC standard is made, I believe BIS must not automatically accept. It is very natural for an Indian committee to review it, knowing well that having reviewed, then if it addresses our climate conditions, our unique conditions in India, that's great. If it doesn't address, then we need to modify or create an India-specific modification to that standard. My personal view is, number one, Mr. Seth mentioned about acceptable quality, a minimum level of safety. What is that acceptable safety or quality with which we have to go overseas? To me, it is about conformity to a standard. So, for example, for circuit breakers and switches, there is a standard known as IEC 60898. Now, if we are conformed to that standard, and that standard is applicable in 99% of the world, our product is automatically acceptable in those markets. It's not about redefining or thinking which safety level is acceptable in Rwanda or Vietnam or Iran or Iraq or US or Europe, in any country. It is about making sure that you are complying with the standard which is acceptable to a certain country. Once we have complied to that, how do we check compliance? We have to also ensure that the certificates, the conformity assessment reports that we have, the test certification, which I think Sabuji and Mr. Seth also alluded to, we need to make sure that those test certificates are valid and they are acceptable in those countries. Unfortunately, part of the politics of the whole thing is that in many countries, our Indian test reports from ARDA or CPRI are not acceptable. And I have been very vocal about it within India and Indian circles as well as overseas, that these laboratories in India are as good as the best in the world. Why should it be that we don't test our products in these labs but have to go to Kima or Rasa or some other laboratories overseas? We need to make sure that these laboratories are accepted brands and institutions so that our test reports in India, because the moment we go to Asta or Kima, the cost goes up. And how does an entrepreneur cover those costs? We have to add up that cost to our own products. And that makes our products sometimes outpriced for the markets which we are exporting to. So this is what we need to address. We take care of these few things. That's why I said, make a policy framework, give us infrastructure, and test labs must be seen as enabling infrastructure. It's not a business, it's an enabling infrastructure for the industry.
If a European switchgear manufacturer does a test in Europe, probably in Germany, it's valid probably in 180 countries. If we do it in India, it is valid only in India. And even for a tender in Nepal, I remember our team, we had really to face a lot of trouble where they said they don't recognize the test, for a tender. So, that puts us at a big disadvantage. And the costs of doing international certification and testings are enormously high. And so I think what he said is very true for us.
We have to just pinpoint what are the problems. Like first problem is certification, because and standardization. These are the second. And third, the recognition of our lab. Although our even design of our products, our type testing, everything is okay. But if they are not accepting our labs, then that's why we approach to ministers also to let embassies in those respective country market the even labs, our CPRI and ADA labs also. These are equivalent because they need to be marketed well. So there we need their help. So the Indian ambassadors in any country can do that. The second thing regarding export, as already I insisted, that we need to have the technology. And technology, wherever it is available, we should get that. Because, even if you do R&D and you are not aware what is going on in the world, then after even 5 years of R&D, you will see that, okay, now this is also obsolete. So we should adopt the latest technologies in Indian context. It will save our money, it will save time, energy, as well as we will be able to compete in the world market. And I am quite sure the entrepreneurship which India has, and Vimalji has already
Right.
said that they are, it's nowhere in the world. Human capability which we have, it's nowhere in the world. Only thing is that infrastructure and right support to our people will really make it happen. And 3 times we can always do that in next 5 years.
Uh, Taking into consideration the recent power outage breakdown, especially in Mumbai, what advice would you suggest for an alternative to have in place even in such an event? So, who would like to take that question?
Maybe I can
I
go
will-
first, and then I'll request Sabuji to address it from the power sector perspective. One of the things that I am working at IEC is, and in fact, the area from where I engaged, in India today, there are a large number of people who do not have any access to electricity. So I'm reminded of this whole work. Worldwide, there are about 750 million, 75 crore people who have no access to electricity at all today, which is 2020, 21st century, where we are talking of AI and blockchain and so many cutting edge technologies. Can you imagine that? And so one of the work that I started with IEC and BIS was to look at how we can improve electricity access in India, which has the biggest challenge, and then in Bangladesh and so many other countries in the world. And our realization is that DC microgrids are possibly one of the way forward. The reason for this is very simple. Most of the loads that you see in your house, and I'm sure Mr. Francis can also see around him, the computers, the mobile phones, the system through which I'm engaging with you today, the light, LED lighting, it's all gone DC. Now, if everything is DC and solar PV panels produce DC, do we really need AC in this connectivity? So I think this change is taking place. In IEC, we started this work in 2014, and India is actually leading the standardization for electricity access at that international level. My feeling is that in the coming years, this realization will come increasingly upon us that part of grid resilience, it doesn't mean that we are going to replace the traditional grid, but grid resilience will come from occasional networked grids, isolated grids, and a network of DC grids kind of a thing.
Delegates, we hope you have enjoyed the session. Before wrapping up today's session, would like to thank our distinguished panelists, Mr. Anil Sabu, Mr. Vimal Mandru, and Mr. Gautam Setsa for being a part of the session and making the discussion very meaningful. I would also like to thank my editor, Mr. Prasad Naya, for taking this initiative. So stay tuned for more such sessions. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.